I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
No, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
Yay Media Group.
The more that we can know about ourselves, that we can truly understand ourselves, what drives us, what might be holding us back from things that, even those things that we want more than anything, but what are those elements of deep inside of us that are either helping us or really hindering that forward movement? There are all types of different personality tests out there. Many of us have done at least one or some of these. There's one that we've been really loving. I've loved this for interpersonal relationships, understanding that better, professional relationships, and then also using this tool. It's called Enneagram, to not only understand ourselves and how we're relating with those around us even better, but using this tool to help us really understand in terms of our own well-being and the things that we're doing or not doing in that space, how this personality, the personality traits that are represented by the Enneagram, how they're helping us, how we're hurting us, and really what are strategies we can do to make the most out of this knowledge. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition is about a topic called Enneagram. And if you are familiar with Enneagram, you're like, oh yeah, cool, I'm excited about this. I've been reading about this or have done it myself, and I'm excited to learn more. If you're not familiar with Enneagram, you're like, what is this word she's saying? So Enneagram, it's Enneagram. Enneagram, it's a system of basically determining different personality traits, these traits that in the system that it describes the patterns of how we're interpreting the world around us, how we're managing our emotions. The Enneagram, it defines 9 different personality types, and these 9 different types are mapped out along basically a circular axis, basically. And they go around the circle, of the 9 different types. And so you're also able to see how your particular type is relating to others. And, each, the premise of Enneagram is that each of these 9 types of personalities, they're defined by a core belief about how the world works. And it's this core belief that is driving our deepest fears, also our deepest motivations. And it's what's fundamentally shaping how we view the world, and that perspective, that lens that we're seeing the world and also the people around us. And so understanding our own Enneagram can really help us have a better understanding of why we're reacting to things the way we do. Also, understanding other people's Enneagram personality type around us can help us understand why they're reacting and behaving the way that they do. So what I would say is, if you haven't done your Enneagram, this is a time that you would pause this podcast, and we have the link in the show notes to it, but there's a bunch of different websites that you can do your Enneagram test. The website that I really love and that I would recommend, and we have the link here, is Truity.com, Truity.com. And so free of charge, you can go onto the Truity website and you can take the Enneagram test. Plan for 15 minutes. It may not even take you 15 minutes, and it's online. Click, click, click. Within 15 minutes, you'll have it completed and you'll see your Enneagram type. The reason I say pause it right now and do it if you haven't. You can go ahead and continue listening to the full episode. I would love it regardless. But I think if you understand what your Enneagram type is, and then you're hearing our conversation as we're going through, this throughout this episode, you're going to have more of that. It's going to be more relatable to you. You'll have that frame of reference for yourself of where you fall in these 9 Enneagram types. Also, if the people who are closest to you are down for it, get them to do it. Whether it's your spouse, your best friends, your kids, the people you work with, whoever you're interacting with the most. It's just, I love asking people to do it because to me, it just really, again, just like we said a bit ago, it helps us understand not only why we react to things the way we do or what might be driving us in certain ways. It's helping us understand how these people closest to us are as well. So I first came across Enneagram with my team. It's something that my team brought to me, the team of dietitians who works with me at Oshner, and specifically it's within our Eat Fit team. And they, several of them had already kind of experimented with Enneagram themselves in their own personal space. And we had done other kind of looser, more general kind of personality assessments, which is always just really useful to understand about yourself and kind of how you relate with the team. So they brought this to me, the Enneagram that several of them had done. And I was like, what are you saying? What is this word? And there's 9 different types. And it felt like a lot at first. I was like, how are we ever going to remember all this? And then when I did it myself and started to really look and see how do they all relate with each other. And part of the reason I mentioned the website Truity, which they have such an incredible amount of information there, education, just it's such a valuable resource. They do have a paid element of Truity, but the part that you can access free of charge just as the consumer, as the layperson, it is just an incredible resource. It's to me very generous of them to provide all of this information to us. So you can go to truity.com, click do your personality assessment. When you get that assessment back, and I'll run through the 9 in just a minute. I'll go through the 9 first. So type 1 is the perfectionist, and it's not just about everything's got to be done right, but there is a lot of emphasis on that. But when we look at someone whose personality traits fall with the Enneagram 1, which is perfectionist, a lot of what their mindset is how do I improve these things around me? It might be improving processes around them. It might be improving the environment, whatever it is around them. They're always looking for ways to improve and enhance the efficiencies or experience of something. So the perfectionist is type 1. Type 2 is the giver. These can be called, sometimes type 2 might be the giver, the helper. These are, we all know the person who is this. And if you think, oh, I bet that person is a giver, a helper, you're probably right as far as their Enneagram type. Type 3 is the achiever. And, we have several folks on our team who are type 3s, and they sort of, part of what's described about a part 3 as the achiever is, they're conscious about how they are perceived. But I think more than anything, the achievers, they're the ones who are doing, they get a lot of fulfillment by accomplishments, accomplishing things with work, having that to-do list, that checklist. One of the dietitians on our team who's an achiever was, just getting close to her delivery date. And she was pregnant, and she realized she had done the Enneagram, and she felt like she was having, a lot of angst over a weekend, and it was getting really close to her due date. And she realized, okay, what's going to bring me that peace and that comfort? And she kind of tuned in, okay, as an achiever, I need to be able to feel like I am doing things and checking things off the list. And she jokingly said she literally made a list of things that she didn't even really have to do, but just so that she could check them off. And it was a way that she was sort of joking about it, but it was a time that felt very vulnerable to her. She felt very vulnerable. There was a lot of, fears there. And so sort of her, self-soothing, it was achieving. And so being able to tune into that, even though that may not be the example that's going to resonate with everyone, the achiever is the doer, getting things done. The type 4 is the individualist. A lot of times you may think of someone who's The artist type personality is going to perhaps be that 4, that individualist. They have that desire to be unique and to experience these deep kind of authentic emotions. Type 5 is the investigator, the person who's, continually seeking knowledge and understanding. They're the data folks. They're the ones who really like, the data, the analyses. So these are type 5s, the investigators. Type 6. Sometimes you'll see this called the skeptic. Sometimes I've seen it called a loyalist. But ultimately, what I see with the type 6s are someone who they like stability. They are hesitant about change. They like to know what to expect. They like to have things, they want to be prepared for whatever might come their way. And they're going to make sure that, in every way possible, they're going to be prepared. So again, skeptic is what it's called on Truity, but others, that may feel more negative than what it is. So sometimes, again, loyalist or that person who's craving stability. Type 7 is the enthusiast. That's actually where I land, is a type 7, which we'll kind of share more about that as I'm talking with our expert guest in just a bit. Type 8 is the challenger, and that's also called different things, but these are the 8 or the challenger. They see themselves as, they're strong, they're powerful, they want to stand up for, and they stand up for what they believe in. And so there's a high sense of making sure they're in control of their environment, and also really standing up not only for what they believe in, but especially standing up for those who may not be able to for themselves. And then 9 is the peacemaker. And these are, someone who maybe goes with the flow, lets others kind of make the decisions, which can seem like it's, people may think, oh, well, that seems like a really good neutral trait. The problem with that can sometimes be the flip side is that, well, maybe it's peacemaker, but it also might be conflict avoidance. And so maybe there are things that need to be brought up, but that peacemaker is like kind of hesitant to bring up or have those difficult conversations. So those are the 9. And that's what I was saying a bit ago. I mean, it can feel like a lot with 9, but ultimately it's not like you have to memorize 9. If you know where you fall on it, you understand that about yourself and what those traits are for yourself. And the people who are closest to you that you interact with the most, you see where they fall on it. That's kind of the main parts that you would take away from it. It's not as if you have to like keep all 9 of these straight. So going back to the website Truity, which again, I am always really, really specific. If we do have a brand who sponsors this podcast, you'll hear me say, if it's a little spot that comes in the middle of a podcast, I always say, hey, let's take a minute to talk about our sponsor XYZ for this podcast. So I'm always super transparent if someone's sponsoring it. Truity is not. They are not sponsoring this. There's at all. I simply found their website, love it, have so much appreciation for the depth of content that they provide for us there. And it's what our team has been using as the resource. And so on the Truity website, so I'll be talking about Truity.com. Our guest is the founder of Truity. And so they're, like I mentioned, they have, so many resources on their site. Of course, there are other websites you can go to for Enneagram. There's other websites, there's other resources. This is just my favorite and the one that I use the most. So when you're on Truity and you pull up your Enneagram types, I mentioned I'm a type 7, which is an enthusiast. It'll kind of give you the key personality traits, that summary of those personality traits. It'll hit on what are typical deepest fears and core motivations for that personality type. And then a really in-depth review of these personality traits, these core values, and then how to recognize that Enneagram number. So how to recognize someone who's a number 7 or an enthusiast. One thing that I really love in here is there's a section that is like when they're healthy. So when you're in a good space. So for me, being that number 7, that enthusiast, when you're in a good space, here's what kind of manifests. Here's these outward actions, behaviors, signs. But when they're unhealthy, here's what can happen. And to me, that is so valuable. So it's basically saying, hey, when you're in a really good space, these are the elements of your personality traits that are driving you in this very positive way. But if you're going through a really stressful time, these can be the elements of that particular personality type that might rear their heads. And it can be good for our when it's ourselves or when it's someone who's really close to us to know that these things can happen in that and kind of be on the lookout for that. There's also, growth tips in there. And then this is really cool. That's also on the Truity site. When we're in relationships and we know that other person's Enneagram number, you can click to say, get more in-depth information on the basically compatibility by Enneagram type. So, if your spouse is, for me, if your spouse is a 1, a perfectionist, then I can, as that number 7 enthusiast, it lists all of them. Click here to see how does an enthusiast typically, what are the interpersonal communications between these others? And so if I have someone on my team who's that 6, that skeptic or that loyalist, what are the things that maybe I need to think through or be aware of that maybe my enthusiasm might also be causing them like a huge amount of pause, or like, wait a second, slow down, like this is too much. So this is tremendous because for whatever your Enneagram type is, you can click to see what are the sort of maybe blind spots or things to just be aware of as you're relating to someone who is fill in the blank, other Enneagram number. So to me, super, super valuable resource there. So again, if you haven't taken your Enneagram test yet, I really think it would be useful to do it before you're listening to the rest of this episode. 15 minutes, go to truity.com. You can click, do it, no charge at all, see what your Enneagram test is. If you have a minute to get those others closest to you to do it, then you can kind of have all of that as that frame of reference as you're listening to us go forward. If not, you're still going to get a lot and you're going to kind of understand a little bit more about like the value and the kind of the scope of what the Enneagram test offers. So I mentioned today that we are joined by an Enneagram expert, Molly Owens. She has her master's degree in counseling psychology. She's also the founder of Truity. And we'll be covering today just how your Enneagram type can give insight on interpersonal relationships, our work roles and professional relationships, also our own personal well-being. We'll be looking at how does our Enneagram type affect our willingness to change or to incorporate these wellness-focused behaviors into our own lives. And what are the aspects of our Enneagram type that can help drive us to succeed? And what are some of those blind spots for us to be aware of? When we're thinking about, our ability or that long-term sustained success, when we're looking at different, whether it's physical goals or having a healthy, positive mindset or achieving a sense of peace, or even if it's looking at, adjusting things in our lifestyle that will affect our sleep or our stress levels, what are some of the strategies that can help us to use our knowledge of our Enneagram type to help bring out the best results, those best outcomes that we're looking for in our personal lives, our professional lives, and also specifically our own well-being? So with that, welcome, Molly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We always love another Molly. I mean, we don't have that many of us.
We don't. It's not a very common name. It's getting there, but yeah.
For humans, there's a lot of puppies and such, as Molly
I
said.
didn't want to say that, but I hear my name a lot in parks.
In parks, I know. So, we're here to talk about, a lot about Enneagram and your expertise in this. And there's so many questions I have about the background of Enneagram that I'm excited to go into with you. But before, tell me a little bit like what you've created with the Truity platform is it's such a incredible, and that's such a trite word for it. It's such a valuable resource for people. And, there's areas on it that someone can sign up and, for a fee, go even deeper. But what you provide in terms of free resources available to everyone, it's just incredible. So first of all, thank you for providing such a valuable tool. But how did it come to be? Let's take a minute to talk about Orgain, our sponsor for this week's episode. I am all about reaching for food and drink that give us that steady stream of energy versus those blood sugar highs and lows. Foods that keep us feeling fuller for longer, optimizing energy for our body and our mind. And protein is a key element of this conversation. And while we can get protein through food, of course, incorporating a protein powder or a ready to drink protein shake can make it easier than ever to reach our protein goals. Orgain is one of those trusted brands that's been a go-to for me personally for years. My husband always keeps the Orgain ready to drink protein shakes on hand. He keeps them at home, at work, in his gym bag. He especially loves their new 30-gram protein drink. They're perfect for him. They've got the 30 grams of protein, also only 1 gram of sugar, and they're a great source of electrolytes as well, more than you'd find in many sports drinks, actually. The Orgain 30-gram protein shakes are available at Costco and Orgain.com. And if you want to get in on the delicious protein-packed nutrition today, head to Orgain.com/fueled20 and use promo code fueled20 for 20% off your order. Once again, that's Orgain.com, Orgain.com/fueled20 for 20% off. And make sure you use the promo code fueled20 so they know you heard it here.
Well, thank you. That's really great to hear. I'm glad we found you and that you found the resources helpful. I think we're part of a larger movement that's about learning who we are and what motivates us. So we've really been lucky to be kind of well placed in that as people are learning more about it, and writers are wanting to write more about it, and we can provide them kind of a publishing platform to talk about that. So yeah, I'm really kind of proud of what we've been able to do and give that information a home. I started off as a counselor. I went to school to be a therapist and then started specializing more in assessments and working as a kind of consultant with individuals and companies. And I was using products that were on the market at the time, but I found that they were very inaccessible. They were expensive. They were kind of clunky. And what I really wanted to do was branch out on my own and create just a more accessible place that people could use to explore on their own, that they could access kind of on their own time, on their own terms, and learn about personality typing, learn about kind of how to figure out what their career interests were, really anything that's sort of kind of in the public consciousness around how we understand ourselves and what we want out of our lives. I wanted to make that just really easy to approach for people.
It's something that you've personally been interested in pretty much your whole life, even before as a kid. This was a type of a thing that just kind of like really revved you up.
Yeah. It always appealed to me. My mom had a degree in psychology, so she would sort of drop these terms and as we were growing up. And I think it was always something that struck me as interesting, learning how to kind of understand people and what motivated them. And I was always interested in learning that kind of stuff about myself. We didn't really have the tools that we have now as I was growing up, but when I would see something like that, it would always spark my interest.
I think it also says a lot about your mom, because sometimes with a parent who's in that space, it can go either way. It can feel like, you're pushing back against it, but as a kid, you really embraced it, and it really kind of lit up that interest in yourself as well. So
yeah.
You're working as a counselor, you're a psychologist working as a counselor, you're working in the sort of consultant space. Creating this website, though, there's a lot of people I feel in the health sphere, whether it's, I can think of so many that are providing that service one-on-one, whether it's a dietitian, it could be like an OB. And the idea is there of, I want to create this website. I want to create this platform for people, and we'll have some content that's available for public consumption, and we'll have the fee-based, but the actual getting it over the hump and implementation of it is a lot. So how long ago did you found it? How long has it been in existence? And kind of what did that look like that you actually took that first step? Like, what was that catalyst that you said, I'm doing it, I'm going in on this?
I think it started with baby steps, and part of it was necessity because I had a horrible job that I hated. I was thinking I have to do something else. No matter how bad I am at this, it has to be better than this job I've got now.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm from California. I'm from Silicon Valley, essentially. So I think the sort of online stuff, that
Yeah.
kind of entrepreneurship stuff, it felt a little bit more natural to me just because I was sort of embedded in it. But yeah, I have to say, really, it was just thinking, how much worse could it get? Because I made a lot
Right.
of wrong choices up until now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that it is because it has to be something that forms kind of that like, perfect storm of circumstances, being a situation you want to get out of, and then being in Silicon Valley, that everyone around you sort of is in that headspace that probably felt less daunting because it's just a different language there. If
yeah.
someone's not familiar with Enneagram, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners, this might be the first time you're hearing it. How do you explain it to someone if it is the first time they're aware of it?
It's hard to explain because it is so kind of mysterious a little bit. And there's just a lot of material there to approach when you first come at it. Most people, though, have either taken the Myers-Briggs or heard about that, or if they've taken some kind of disc, maybe something with work or with college or high school. They've taken some kind of personality system. So if you think about kind of personality typing and sort of putting people into categories based on common commonalities or common traits. Enneagram is about that, but it's more about kind of what's inside and what's in your soul, the things that you wouldn't necessarily show in your everyday life that other people wouldn't necessarily know about you. But if you really look deep inward, what's in there? What's really motivating you? What is your kind of core belief about how the world works? And what are the things that you are just even unconsciously trying to go towards and avoid?
It's not something that you created. It's not something that's even in the past few decades. This is something that's been around for a really long time. What's the history as we know it of Enneagram?
Nobody really fully knows.
That's why you say it's a little bit mysterious too. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, they definitely have thinkers that have done a lot of work on it, but whether they originated it or whether it started before them is not really super clear. There's mentions of sort of the diagram or something about 9 types being in even very like ancient texts. But more recently, there were kind of, I would say, sort of spiritual leaders that dove more into it. But again, it's the origin is not exactly clear.
And when you say like ancient texts, like back in the like in the BC times or like far back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, far back. And we're not really sure if that was referencing the Enneagram
Right.
specifically. I think there's a sense, and you can choose to ascribe to believe this or not, but there's a sense that there's something kind of essential about it, something that there's just knowledge that was waiting to come out and kind of popped up in different places.
It seems that, whether it's hundreds or thousands of years ago, that the core of, like you said, the 9 personality types, it would seem to make sense that as that started to take shape, however long ago that was, these different thinkers, as you refer to it, have been in different places around the world, have researched and kind of pulled together and added to that and almost refined it seems, to what the Enneagram is today that we see. And you mentioned the diagram. And so it's kind of hard to explain visually. So what I would just say to our listeners, we're going to have, links in the show notes to get you there so you can see what we're talking about there. But there's the 9 different personality types. And so from there, do you think that, I guess I think of well, first of all, tell us what type you are.
I'm a 4.
Which is the individual.
Yeah, the individualist. Yeah. And 4s are kind of about individuality. It's like kind of the push and pull of playing with belonging with other people and being like other people and being, an individual and being different.
I would think a lot of artists are 4s, which also sort of goes into the being that 4, being that individualist, would also kind of play into the same type of a personality trait that would start something like Truity. You would not be afraid to set yourself off into that space and take that risk or start something new there.
Yeah, I can definitely see that thread running through. I don't think fours are really well known for starting businesses necessarily, but certainly being in the creative
Yeah.
profession. And for me, I think I have other characteristics that make me a sort of more analytical and that sort of thing, which is maybe not as typical of a four, but blending that with something where I can just kind of create it however I want it, I think definitely the thread runs through there.
Mine is a 7, so
Oh,
enthusiast. Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
And as I
Right.
read the enthusiast, which we'll share more with our listeners as we go, but as I read the summary and when, you know, what are the things that drive us with that, and like when we're in a healthy space and when we're in a not healthy space, it all resonates very, very, very much with me. But like you said, you have certain analytical parts of you that kind of may drive you in a certain way that might be different than someone who might be um, what we might think of as like a typical artist who might not be starting their own business or business minded. For me, as the enthusiast, there's the element of it that sometimes one of the themes that from as I understand it, is that there can be a lot of trying new things or kind of a lack of focus. And you're
Mhm.
trying this over here and kind of bouncing around and popping around. And it's interesting because that's one element of it that I don't find that I relate to, but I think there's other parts of my personality that kind of have a focus and a drive that once I'm in
Mhm.
something, I'm in it and committed, versus oh, this looks good. This is shiny over here. This is over here. Where sometimes I think the enthusiast personality can be a little bit of that. So I think both of those things of just even you and I saying that as people are listening to this, and as you've hopefully done your own Enneagram type and you're asking everyone in your life to do theirs, because you probably will once you do yours and you understand it and how you relate to others. I think that, that's also just something to kind of be aware of, is like there's a lot of it that's going to resonate with us, and then there's going to be parts of it not. And I don't think that we'll get too much into this here, but as our listeners are doing their Enneagram, you'll see that there's something referenced as a wing. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about that to kind of clarify for people as they're exploring?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely echo what you said, that everything about your type doesn't have to fit in order for you to find value in the system. I think what you want to really look at is the sort of core aspects, like what are the things that really drive me at a very deep level, and that's how you know your type, even if the sort of surface manifestations are a little bit different. And then a wing can be something that helps you expand your understanding. So the idea with the wing is that we do plot the 9 types kind of around a circular diagram, which means that each type has 2 types on either side of it. So as a 4, I have 3 and 5 on either side of my type. And because the types they have sort of adjacent qualities. Um, so as a 4, I'm, kind of into individuality and charting my own path, but it also can be attractive to me to try to achieve success in the eyes of other people, which is more characteristic of a 3. And when I'm sort of leaning into that wing, the wing being kind of the type on the side, I'm thinking less about what's exactly authentic to me and more about kind of getting that recognition from the outside world. Wings, there are some different schools of thought about wings. One is that it's sort of more of a type, so that I would be a 4 wing 3 if that was the wing that I identified more with. But I think it's more useful to think of them as kind of adjacent styles that you can lean into if you want to. So if I'm, entering some sort of competition where I could win an award for my business, I'm leaning into my 3, and that's really useful for me to kind of um, get in that mindset of getting out and grabbing that ring. Whereas if I'm doing a kind of research project and I'm digging into the data, that has more to do with my 5 wing, which is more about just gathering knowledge and really being analytical and studying. So I think of wings as kind of things that you can access. They're kind of adjacent to your natural style, and you can kind of ease in and out of them as you want to.
And as someone does the Enneagram test, you get a visual representation of the where they plot on that circle that you mentioned. And so for me, I'm a 7 wing 8, and so this it's like it's like little slices of pie, like anyone can kind of visualize your pie chart. And so for me, being the 7 wing 8, that 7 is my biggest slice of pie. And then next to it is the next biggest, which would be my wing 8. Do you mind doing just a quick run through of each of, not that anyone's going to remember these. And this is something that our team, our Eat Fit team really embraced Enneagram, the dietitians who work with me, even before I was like fully aware of it. And they're like, Molly, like, we've got to do this. This is so like interesting. And they had done it some in their own kind of interpersonal relationships and really seen the value of it. And so we started to do it as a team. And we had done a few others that you mentioned, different kind of like personality assessments, and some that were way more simple, you know, kind of 4 or like even 4 colors. But even that to me was already eye-opening, you know, even just breaking it into 4 and being much more general, it already really like made me so much more aware of how different we all think and how different we can be presented with the same information or situation or problem, and it is completely different to all of us. And so realizing even with the colors or these others that we did, and then especially with the Enneagram, that with me being the enthusiast, seeing things that are new and creating new content, creating new programming, having that vision, for me, that's energizing and I thrive on it. And it's so much fun. And then for someone on my team who maybe we'll talk about some of them that might be other types that for them is almost, it's paralyzing. And it can be, you know, they could see it as like, I'm never doing enough. And I realized, wow, my enthusiasm has nothing to do with what they're doing or not doing, but I needed to really realize that. And so what I found is being, well, how could this be anything but like a really cool thing to try out this new project that, wow, I need to sort of buffer that and be really aware of how other people are processing that very same thing in a very different way. So, as our team would talk, and even before I got fully familiar with Enneagram, they would say, oh, well, so-and-so, you know, they're an Enneagram, and they would say the number sort of knowingly. And I would say, tell me what that one is again. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. And so then I would, you know, kind of really think through it. And the other part that I really love about Truity is you do such a good job of, you know, if I'm a 7, which is the enthusiast, and my husband is a 1, which is the perfectionist, you have in there for every personality style, what to be aware of when we're connecting with every single other personality style. So y'all, if you click in here and you see, for me, again, being a 7 enthusiast, I can click and see what are those things to really be aware of when I'm interacting with someone who's that other specific trait. And so if there's things that you're wondering, like, there feels like there's a gap in communication or a gap in interpretation. So all of that to me is wonderful. So I'm going to stop talking. And if you don't mind walking us through just the 9 and sort of a brief rundown on those, and then we can kind of get into how these affect us in our day-to-day behaviors.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think what might be helpful for people who are new to the system is to know that there are 9 types, but they're in sort of 3 buckets. And those are based on kind of the center of your body or your being, that is sort of the most central to you. So there are heart types, there are head types, which are sort of more intellectual, and then there are body types who are more sort of gut based. And each of the 3 types, or sorry, each of the 9 types belongs to one of those 3 categories. So within the heart types, we have 2, 3, and 4. 2 being a heart type that's focused on taking care of other people. 3 being a heart type that's focused on kind of success with other people. So prominence, kind of making a place for themselves amongst their social groups. And then 4 being a heart type that's focused more inwardly on their own kind of emotions and finding their own way kind of around that emotional landscape. And also, like I said, kind of with the interplay of belonging versus separating.
And the way that they'll sort of be, I think the simple names that are on there, like the type 2, and going through those heart types, type 2, different sites will sometimes refer to them as different names, I suppose. But I really like how Truity categorizes them. And so the type 2 is the giver, or you can think of that as the helper. And we have several of the givers and the helpers on our team, and they're always the one that says, I can do that, And so I've learned when we have someone who's a type 2, I have to make sure that they're not overextending themselves because they always want to jump in and help everyone. And so in the heart type, the type 2 being the giver, the type 3 being the achiever. And so that was what Molly was just saying is, she's 4 is her primary, which is the individualist, but that 3 can also really drive her of being sort of in that achieving. So if you even just think like the giver or the helper, and then the achiever, and then the individualist, those are 3 very different things that are characteristics that are all in that heart space. So just kind of recap it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And the heart space is all about sort of your own emotions and how you relate to other people. So it's kind of 3 strategies of dealing with that sort of larger question of how do we balance our emotions with connection with other people. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really I like hearing I hadn't really gone into the heart, head, gut kind of connection on these. So, okay.
Yeah, I think it helps because there is so much information. And I think having those points to come back to sort of helps organize it in your mind. Yeah. So the head types, these are sort of more analytical, kind of cerebral, thinking things through. So kind of when I went to my Enneagram training, we watched people walk around and the head types sort of walk with their heads leaning forward. So you can actually see it in like your physicality. You're kind of leading with your head. And so you would be under a head type. I haven't seen it.
Right.
It might be something to think about. So that's 5, 6, and 7. 5s are the sort of, it's kind of bookish. I want to take in a lot of information, take in a lot of knowledge type. 6s are sort of using their heads to try to game out everything that could possibly happen. So there's a lot of thinking through, anticipating, sometimes some anxiety with 6s. And then there's a sort of aspect where they're like, okay, I've got it all sorted out. Now I just want to relax. So there's kind of, again, a push and a pull there.
And you guys refer to that as the skeptic on there. And sometimes I've seen it as like the loyalist. The way that we have several 6s on our team, and they really crave stability, and they really want to know and not be surprised. Like you don't want to spring anything on them. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. Because I think what's important to know about 6s is they're trying to anticipate everything.
Right.
So if you throw a wrench in those gears by bringing up something that they haven't anticipated, they're going to have to do a lot of mental work to kind of incorporate that in their plans. Yeah. And, as you can imagine, that can be sort of exhausting. So that's why we see such a draw for stability with 6s, because they do say, okay, I've got everything sorted out and now I can just take a break.
Mm-hmm. And so 5 and 6 in the head type, and then 7 is the third.
7 is the third head type. So what 7 is all about is experiencing everything there is to experience in life. This is sort of the FOMO type, just wanting to feel like they got everything they possibly could, like they've seen everything they can. It's just that that they haven't missed out on anything, any adventures or experiences.
And the 7 is the enthusiast, which is what I am. And I think for me, I don't always have the plan. I don't always have it all mapped out. I'll have the idea, and my way is we'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then I realize the people who are on my team who are not that way, it is panic inducing for them. And so those are some of the things that, even if this is how we are and we live our life, having that awareness, it can be such a good thing, because also how many times did that personality trait get me neck deep into something that I thought, oh, wow, this is so much more than I anticipated. We bit off way more than I thought this was going to be. And so now having that awareness, I may still have that natural reaction as the enthusiast to say, yeah, let's do it. We'll figure it out. But now I've actually learned from this and learned from the Enneagram and the other kind of experiences and said, okay, I need to turn to someone who's one of those other traits that I trust and say, here's my idea. What do you think of this? What do we need to think through before we commit to it? And as simple as that sounds, like that's an obvious thing that it's a good idea to just do anyway. But as that enthusiast, you jump head first. And so just sort of with all of these, like learning some of those things can be really good, but where can they maybe be a blind spot for us? So in the head space, we have the investigator, that 5, the skeptic or the person who really likes that stability is the 6, and then the enthusiast is the 7. And then the third category.
So the third category is the body types, or the gut types, you sometimes hear them called. And the idea is that it's sort of more about that gut reaction or that instinct rather than staying in your emotions or staying in your intellect. It's just about kind of acting from your gut. And another thing that's another thread that we see with the gut types is anger, or some kind of play around anger in some way, which is not to say that these types are angry, but to the extent that, anger is part of the human experience. For the gut types, it's a little more central, and that kind of figuring out how to navigate it is a little bit more central to their experience. So with 8 and 9, we see almost opposite ways of dealing with that kind of anger. 8s really tend to lean into kind of being assertive, almost even sometimes being aggressive, really not being vulnerable, really taking charge of a situation and kind of letting everyone know that they are kind of doing their thing and that they're not going to be rolled over.
And that's what y'all refer to as the challenger.
The challenger. Yeah. And then the 9s are very much about kind of letting things flow. So not really making decisions, not taking charge, kind of feeling out the situation and figuring out where they fit into it. And the 9 really is about harmony. So they don't want to be disrupted by anger or conflict or really any sort of strong emotions. They just kind of want to roll with those waves.
In the 9, y'all refer to it as the peacemaker. And I think that on the surface, that seems like a really, oh, wow. Someone would say, that's so great that they're a peacemaker. But to me, and there are really, really beautiful traits that come with a peacemaker. But in certain settings, I think, and tell me if this is not correct, but the way that I also sort of translate that in my mind is conflict avoider.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though we think peacemaker, like they're keeping things just really in harmony, but it could almost be to a detriment if they are avoiding conflict and to maintain peace. So they're just not addressing something that maybe should be addressed.
Right. Yeah. I think the big danger, or the big thing that 9s have to grapple with, is the potential of losing themselves. So this is kind of the quintessential type that won't say no, even though they really want to say no. And we see that also with 2s. We talked about 2s, the giver that always want to step in and help. With 2s, it's more about they want to be important to other people. They want to help. They want to be indispensable. They want to be the person that you call when you're having a hard time. With 9s, it's less about that motivation to connect and more about just let's go with the flow. Let's not upset the apple cart. Let's just fit into what's happening and not create waves.
And then the last of the gut.
The last of the gut types is type 1. And you don't see as much of a kind of explicit interplay with anger with 1, but 1s are always about doing the right thing. This is the right thing. This is the wrong thing. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to figure out what the correct move is, and I'm going to fit into that. And then the anger is a little bit more directed towards people who are not doing that, people who aren't picking up their end of the bargain, people who are breaking the rules. So it's all about kind of that structure and what's right and wrong and how we're supposed to live. And what we feel about people who aren't doing that.
And I mentioned that my husband is a 1, and which is the perfectionist. And one of the things that I read that's sort of a sign of the trait is they're constantly looking for ways to improve systems or processes or their surroundings or their environment. And so you can be like I'm the grateful recipient of that in a lot of ways, because, he'll say, hey, look, I figured out this way to organize this element of our house. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. He's always looking for how can this be a little smoother, better, more efficient. But then just like any of these types, and I think Truity has just such a really good space of, okay, when we're in a really good space, here's sort of how these traits manifest themselves. But if we're not, here's what to kind of watch out for. So as we're looking, and thank you for walking through those with me, as we're talking about the different types of Enneagram traits, are there some that, when we kind of shift to the focus of wellness, well-being? So I think what I would say to our listeners is, when you're talking about personal relationships, when you're talking about professional relationships, I have found really a lot of value in asking the people closest to me that I work with and closest to me in my life, hey, take this test. And how I say it's about 15 minutes. Is it about?
Yeah.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
and that can be just really enlightening. And sometimes they want to learn more about it and talk more about it. Sometimes they don't. But even just having them take it can be really, really beneficial. So I would say there's so much from the personal and professional space. And on the Truity website, there's so much that can help guide you in learning more about that. When we're talking about wellness and well-being, are there certain Enneagram types that tend to experience greater success in making long-term changes needed to support well-being?
That's an interesting question. I think there are certain Enneagram types that we tend to see being more active overall. There are some types that tend to react to life or deal with issues or kind of solve problems by getting out there and doing something. So these are the types that we probably would see more kind of inclined to exercise or, taking up a kind of new diet to try to solve their issues. And those are generally 3, 7, and 8. Those are all the types that kind of get out there into the world and, they go for a run or they join a group or they're like, we're going to do something about this.
So the 3, 7, and 8 being the achiever, being the 3, the 7 being the enthusiast, or the 8 being the challenger. They're going to,
Yes.
okay, receive the information. What am I going to do? How am I going to take action on this? Okay. Are there any that you would say struggle more?
I think there definitely are types that struggle more with the sort of kind of standard fitness culture, for sure, that it takes a little bit more time to find your place within it. For instance, the 5, the investigator, tends to be very cerebral, very research based. So they are more likely to be interested in kind of reading a scientific study about the effects of exercise in the body. But when it comes to actually going for a run, that's really not within their comfort zone. So for types like that, I think you have to dig a little bit deeper to find your path within that.
And I think through about like nutritional changes and, as a dietitian, decades of working with clients and our team of dietitians who see clients, the 5s that you mentioned that are sort of more the investigator, the cerebrals, I think that now I'm thinking, gosh, should we have all of our clients do the Enneagram before they come meet with us? Because those that are the investigators, it would probably be they probably want to understand the why or, seeing the almost the proof for the research before they're committing to something. I wondered too, because when we think about wellness, there's movement, there's that, like you said, finding what type of maybe exercise or physical movement might feel right or they're feeling comfortable with. And someone may feel a little bit more like they're comfortable reading it and learning it, but putting themselves out there might be a little bit of a hesitation. Then also there's the nutritional side where it's committing to a change. It may be committing to dialing back certain things in their diet or committing to adding in certain things or being consistent with adding, collagen daily or whatever it is. And, one of the things that we always say just nutritionally or any of the wellness type approaches is consistency is essential. So we mentioned, my type, the enthusiast, sometimes a drawback for that type is that they may tend to bounce around and they try the latest diet trend or the latest, active, and then, well, nothing seems to work, but maybe we're not sticking with it long enough. I would also wonder if the ones which are the perfectionists, or is there some where it can be like they don't even get started because unless they feel they can do it all the way, they're like, why even bother doing it a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah. I think ones in particular would be kind of paralyzed if they think that the correct way is not feasible for them. So that might be the sort of the type of person that really needs to hear, like, it's better to do something than to do nothing.
I
It's
actually
better to
had in here, do they risk the paralysis of perfection? I actually had
yeah,
paralysis now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So progress is better. Progress is better than nothing.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
messaging there. Um, I would wonder about the sixes. We talked about the sixes that are the skeptic, or those that are sort of, they like stability. I would imagine that maybe they would be slow to embrace that new lifestyle change, but then once they did, they would probably be maybe more likely to continue to follow through.
I would guess so too. Yeah, I would think that a six would probably want to kind of, again, game out all the possibilities. If I started running, what would that look like? Is it
Right.
possible I would hurt my knee?
Right.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
If I started lifting weights, what would that look like? Really explore all the possibilities. But I think once a six has done all that mental work and figured out what's feasible, what really fits their lifestyle, and kind of gotten into the routine, I would expect a six would be really good at sticking with a routine that they had planned out really carefully.
I'm really thinking through like decades of clients that I'm like, oh yeah, because sometimes you would there's yeah, we have conversations with clients, or what seems like a very simple shift as the provider, as the dietitian working with them, and I'm sure you as the psychologist, it seems so simple, and there would be such a level of processing sometimes. It seemed to like really far outweigh the small little edit we're talking about. Um, twos being the giver or the helpers. I was also thinking, is it possible that they can almost be sometimes the twos that I think of that I know in my life, are they so focused on helping others and taking care of others that they do put their own needs aside, maybe more than others do?
Yeah, there's definitely the danger of that with truths, that they can just get so kind of booked up with other people's needs that they really are not paying attention to themselves. But twos are the perfect client to do the sort of accountability partner, or a class where you kind of get friendly with all the people who are in your class, and they're going to miss you if you don't show up. That's I think, the perfect approach for somebody who's a two, to tie in their desire and their sort of inclination to be committed to other people, but tie that to whatever their wellness goals are.
Are there, as we're talking through the different, when we think about, again, well-being and whole body well-being, I think about how are we getting that movement in regularly? How are we committing to, primarily like nourishing our bodies and focusing on nourishing our bodies, trying to remove guilt whenever there's, because there's always things that we have that aren't perfectly nutritious, and people can be really hard on themselves for that. So we do mostly nourishing foods, and when we have something that we just like because it tastes good, and that's okay, and we let that go. But then also, so there's the nutrition and there's the movement, and then there's also, for that well-being of how much are we able to accept a feeling of peace, versus continuing to look for more. How much are we able to separate from the stressors that we're experiencing? So I think of that well-being as being able to step away or separate or find other outlets for stress, our sleep, how we're managing that, how we're able to embrace a sense of peace or feel as if we are deserving of this, versus someone who maybe thrives on having a little chaos all the time. So with that, kind of thinking of like this whole rounded view of wellness and well-being, and then having people kind of think through their own Enneagram, what are some of the things that you would just maybe blind spots for people to think about, or things that could be just oh, wow, I hadn't thought of it in that way?
Mm-hmm. Well, your Enneagram type really all stems from a kind of core belief about how the world works. And that ties in with a core fear, because your core belief isn't going to be totally accurate. It's going to have some fears tied up into it, like, I have to do this, otherwise this horrible thing will happen. So when you get into the Enneagram, really diving into that and thinking about that and thinking about how it's affected your life and how it maybe plays out in stressful situations that you've dealt with. That's really where you need to start. You need to understand, I reacted this way because it played into this fear that I have. And that once you have that, and you can start to sort of just shine a light on those beliefs and think about, is this true in this situation? Is it helpful in this situation? If I set this belief to the side, can I see it another way? And it may be the situation that was causing you stress doesn't even really need to be all that stressful. Maybe it was just kind of playing into something that was hard for you, hard to deal with for you. And it may be that it is going to continue to be hard for you. But when you sort of understand why it's so difficult, then you have, I think, a broader range of responses that you can bring to figuring out how to deal with it.
It can be really hard because, or I think not even can be, I think it's almost always, there's elements of it that will feel really hard as we're doing this, because as you're reading through your own Enneagram type, just like Molly said, these are our kind of core beliefs or core motivations, sort of our deepest fears. And so undoing that is then no small feat, you know? And as I look at on the Enneagram 7, which is me, the enthusiast, deepest fear is getting stuck in a rut, you know, and doing the same. And so they're always seeking out things that are exciting or fun or new. And, you know, a few years back, I'd mentioned to you just briefly before we started recording, but we had the opportunity to do a 3-month sabbatical through my husband's work, and his was paid, mine not paid, but being able to go 3 months and step away from work and plan for work to still happen while we were gone, but then, you know, empower the people that work with us to, you know, step into other roles that they hadn't done before. But when I did step away from that, there was so much that I realized in those 3 months, the types of places that what type of Airbnb, does it have an outdoor space? Does it have a cool porch or a cool balcony? We realized that our entire time was centered on how can we be outdoors more? Yet my life normally was not. I would get in, my office is in a gym. And so I would get into work and work out in the gym 5:30 in the morning and then start work at 7:30. And sometimes I might be there all day until the sun was down and then I'd be leaving. And I thought I wasn't outside at all. And so I really shifted when we came back from those 3 months, and I started doing my workouts here at the house and outdoors. And our outdoors was fine, but we really transformed our outdoor space to really, that was what we found so much joy in. And then also, as I was learning more about Enneagram and the different personalities, I realized different personality types, that constantly having that enthusiasm and trying things could be, again, not only, you know, bring panic with my team, but it was just too much. And so I sort of have really gone through that essentialist mindset of like, okay, what's really going to get us closer to our goal, whether it's personally or professionally? Is this just adding a distraction, or is this actually getting us closer to what we want to do? And I don't filter everything through that, but I've really made that shift. And so I look at my days now, and the reason I say all that is I look at my days now, and there's so much less packed into it. Maybe before that would have felt like the stuck in a rut part to me, but I love it. Like I relish it. And I realize that it's so like nourishing for me versus, you know, being gone all day long, or, you know, in an office space with no windows all day long. I was like, wow, I feel so much more full whenever I'm not doing that. And so, but before that might have felt very dull or something that I would have felt like, or there would be other reasons not to. So I think there's things that as we look at what those fears are, core motivations, it can feel scary to make these changes.
Yeah. And I think it's really just about making conscious choices. So you don't want your fears to be making the choices for you without you having the opportunity to think about it and step in and say, is this what I really want? So it's not about, you know, turning your whole life upside down and shaking everything up. It's just about looking at what might be driving you, and then saying, if I'm not getting where I want to go, is there something driving me that I need to be aware of so that I can, you know, take the control back from whatever these unconscious forces might be.
I think when you said not letting your fears, you know, make your decisions for you, even it seems that it could be beneficial, even if someone still makes that decision if they're at least aware that fear was behind it, or even in hindsight, if we can start to look back at other things and think, okay, this is where that came from, to try to learn from that for moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, it's perfectly fine to say it's too scary to try to do this right now. I'm not ready for it. I don't have the emotional bandwidth for it. I'm just going to take a pause. I know, this is something that would have benefits, but I just can't, I can't approach it right now. But, the important part is thinking that through and acknowledging it and bringing it up to the surface so that you can really grapple with it. So maybe later when you're feeling a little bit stronger, you can come back to it.
So I encourage everyone, if you didn't pause it earlier and do your own Enneagram, do it. It's 15 minutes, y'all. We're going to have the link to the Truity website, and you can do your test there. Tell us about some of the resources that you guys have to kind of walk people through. But like we said, it's not easy and it can be really scary. What are some of the resources that y'all have on Truity to support?
Yeah, so definitely start with taking the assessment. It can take 15 minutes. It definitely can be faster if you're sort of a self-aware person. You can get it relatively quickly. You'll get a summary of your type, or the sort of top scoring type for you. You definitely want to continue to do your reading and maybe investigate the top 2 or 3 types that you scored for to make sure that you really have the right fit. And you can do that on our site as well. We have really in-depth profiles of each of the types. Like you mentioned, we have some looks at kind of how those types interact. So once you find your type, if you find your spouse's type, you can look at sort of what those dynamics might look like. And then we have a lot of just really helpful articles about Enneagram and kind of any topic you can think of in your life, how you function in the workplace, articles about type and wellness. So really, whatever you're dealing with in your life right now, whatever that area of focus is, you can kind of explore our blog and our articles to figure out what wisdom there might be out there to offer you.
Yeah, y'all even have specifically Enneagram and stress research and sleep, even career and salary comparisons based by Enneagram type. And then also just for our listeners to know that Molly and the Truity team, they have a really generous offer for our listeners. It's 40% off of Truity's Enneagram test. So you can do the free test, and we'll have the link to that. And that's what Molly was just kind of walking y'all through. But if you do want to upgrade to Truity's full, it's 19-page report. It's going to give you even more detail and more guidance. You can use the promo code FUELED at checkout, and it's going to be 40% off of that. So we'll include all of this in the show notes as well. But I really appreciate y'all doing that too for the listeners. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I hope a lot of people take advantage of it because we have a ton of really good information in the report. It's you can read your profile of your type, but the report is very personalized to you, so you really get to understand how you fit into that type profile.
This has been incredibly enlightening for me. I felt like I was pretty familiar with it, but I knew there was a lot to learn that I don't know. And I think it's been so helpful to me personally. And I know it will be for our listeners as well. And if you don't mind, I think if there's different topics in the future, I may poke and say, hey, can we talk about how our Enneagram might affect how we deal with fill in the blank? I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that too. There's so much to dive into.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Tremendous thank you to Molly Owens for spending the time with us. I think there's so much to learn in this space. We can really think that we know ourselves well, but there's always more that we can learn. There's more that we can understand, and not just how it relates to ourselves individually, but also how those different personality traits really kind of fit in that bigger picture, and how in those interpersonal relationships, those professional relationships, and the priorities and personal goals that we have for ourselves, how all of this comes into play. So I mentioned that the Truity team is giving us a very generous discount for our listeners. So I'll include the links and the information for that, the promo code FUELED in the show notes of this episode. And I'll include the other links that we talked about. And always let me know what you think. If you do your Enneagram and there's, anything that's enlightening that you run across as you're doing this, I would love to hear about it. If there's things that maybe you felt like you kind of knew this space pretty well, but there was a little bit of a, something that maybe helped you or gave you a different perspective on it, I always want to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next time for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.